So sustainable job growth, it's really about the kinds of jobs that are created um, when an economy starts to grow. So the kinds of jobs that are created might be like casual work, or it might be 3-month contracts, or it might be some kind of freelancing or gig economy. So the idea of sustainable job growth is that it's growth that can continue at a satisfactory pace and that those jobs aren't going to go away quickly. So it's less of a boom or bust, more of a steady, a process that can be sustained is what sustainable means here. So it's related to the types of jobs that are created, but it's also related to whether or not that growth in the economy is substantial or if it's a kind of very temporary up and down sort of thing. Which then it relates to the next sentence because the next sentence is about job quality. As yeah, it means after a recession.
So
In the
after a massive
aftermath
oil
of
recession. Mm,
Aftermath implies something a bit more grandiose or large scale. So the
mm,
idea is that there's been this kind of disastrous economic shrinking. A recession is where the economy shrinks for a certain number of periods in a row. And it usually means that businesses close, that people lose their jobs, that they don't, that their wages don't go up, that profits don't go up. Um, so that's what's happening there. They're talking about what happens after the economy shrinks and they want to start growing it again. And then part of that problem is what sorts of jobs are created. The problem of job quality is then the theme of the next sentence. And so this is introducing a distinction. It's saying that sustainable growth is seen as a positive, but job quality isn't always seen as positive. That is, whether jobs are actually good to do. So they might believe in this next idea, any job is better than no job. Yeah.
uh,
So what they're saying here, the problem of job quality may be seen as hindering job growth. That is, if what we prioritize is good quality jobs, the kind of jobs that people will have for a longer period of time, where they have good conditions, where they will be treated fairly and respectfully, that is sometimes seen, may be seen as stopping job growth. So it may be seen as preventing more jobs from becoming available. So if a government decided to put rules in place that said you can't just hire people at these sub living wages, or you can't hire people and make them work 80 hours a week.
80 hours a week?
Yeah, like
I haven't heard of that.
well, okay, let's say 60 hours a week. If a government made a law that said people can't work more than 40 hours a week because we want sustainable job growth that's also quality job growth. They want good quality jobs where people can do other things with their lives and you have to pay them a certain amount. Some people would argue that that's going to stop jobs from being created.
Mm.
So that's what the hindering job growth idea is that if a government comes along and says part of our job growth approach is that we want to make sure that the jobs that are created as the economy grows are quality jobs, are jobs that people will want to do, where they'll get paid fairly. No, what they mean is if the government enforces rules so that those jobs aren't exploitative, that might stop some companies from hiring people.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah,
I got
so
it. Perfect.
it's when they talk about job quality, they're talking about all of the things the government can control.
Mm.
Like it can say, here is the minimum wage you have to pay. Here is the maximum number of hours you can make somebody work. Here are the, other conditions that those people might live under or work under. Yeah, so, and what's interesting here is that sustainable job growth is being put. They're saying that people often see that as separate from whether jobs are good quality jobs. That is, if the growth is sustainable, it means it will continue. But it's often seen as whether the issue of whether those jobs are good jobs is seen as separate. Yeah.
To be honest, because I've heard that the problem with the Canada is that they are just having a lot of high quality job in the government, and because of that particular job, they need to have 4 other jobs in the private section, and because of this it will stop the economy. Yeah, but I think I got it somehow.
So what happens if the rules are too strict and uneconomical? You end up with people doing the work anyway, but half illegally. So that's the risk, is if other rules aren't enforced, like who can live there, under what conditions they can be employed, doing other things, then if the jobs, you kind of have that a bit in universities here. That is, if you're a continuing university staff member, you have quite good pay and conditions, but there aren't enough people who have been hired that way to actually teach all of the classes that need to be taught. So someone else needs to still teach those classes. And so there's a lot of people who've been strung along on short contracts. So they're not quality jobs. They've got a good rate of pay, but you don't know if you're going to have a job 3 months from now. So that would be an example of some of the weird contradictions that you're talking about.
Great.
So they're setting up a contrast between there being lots of jobs, feeling. So they're not calling it an idea, because that would be giving it too much credit. They're saying it's a feeling people have that any job is better than no job. So people in government might think that any job is better than no job, because of course they don't have to work those kind of jobs. And they might be justified if there's high unemployment. So they're saying it's a sentiment rather than an idea, because they want to go on to challenge this way of feeling about policy. Then it says, however, if the balance between, this is also about between in this case, balance works because we're looking at two things, two separate ideas. We've got quality on the one hand and quantity on the other. So the balance between quality of existing jobs and quantity of new jobs, creating new jobs. If it comes out of balance, then that could create stress for everybody, apparently.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's why balance rather than problems, because it's between two things. The rest of the sentence develops into those two things.
So
no, not
you don't
really.
have problem between in English. Yeah.
You could say, in a kind of informal way, you could say there are problems between my colleagues
And me. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So sometimes we put problems between people, but it's in a quite informal way. If you wanted to be precise, you would say, I'm in conflict with, or there's a disagreement between us. You might say, rather than problems between us.
Great.
Ongoing jobs might almost be right, if what they wanted to talk about here was the fact that they were like a continuing appointments. That is, if they had secure jobs, it might almost be right. But what they're really saying is that rules about jobs, rules that affect jobs, only affect jobs that already exist. Like that's their immediate effect. If you say that these are the rules about what a job has to involve, then, and you're doing that to improve their quality, Yeah, this is quite hard to explain, but I would say it's because they're highlighting that the thing that the rules are being applied to is the jobs that already exist, and the contrast is with jobs that might exist. There's new jobs, and they might be prevented from existing, or they might not come into existence because of too strict rules. So that's why existing is slightly more appropriate here. Ongoing could work grammatically. Yeah, but they want to emphasize that if you make rules about jobs, you can only make them about jobs that really exist.
This now, not the job that will
Yeah.
create in the future, which has the meaning of
so
ongoing here.
But also ongoing as an adjective implies that they're jobs that you continue to hold rather than a process of job creation that's ongoing.
Mm.
So it's the quality of these jobs that they are ongoing. It would be like saying they're long-term contracts or they're permanent contracts, which is not quite what they want to focus on here.
Exactly. And also regarding this one,
a recent British.
We can sign the homogeneous material.
I think we've moved on to another one. Okay, so a recent British Academy Policy Centre report on stress at work highlights these concerns and describes the context, determinants, and consequences of work-related stress in Britain. Okay, so this is about the full context, why we would choose matters rather than concerns. So matters is neutral. To say that it highlights these matters is to say it points to these issues or questions, whereas to say it highlights these concerns, it's referring back to the concerns about stress, work stress, that are mentioned at the end of the previous sentence. So it's just contextual that this one would be preferred over the other. There's nothing grammatical about it. So the final clause of the sentence above, this could increase work stress among current and future workers.
Stress, yeah. It is a concern, yeah.
It's a concern, yeah. So they're saying that that's a concern. But you could call these matters as well if you were referring to the whole discussion previously. It just wouldn't be quite as pointed or precise.
Here.
The context of work-related stress in Britain, the context, determinants, and consequences of work-related stress in Britain. Yeah. So that's the context that they're talking about there.
Yeah, great.
So it's actually forward referential. So context of, determinants of, consequences of, and then we find out work-related stress.
Yeah, great.